Let's be brutally honest right now. That's a big question.
I'm looking for someone who doesn't want to go to base camp, but they want to go to the very top.
Whether it's here, India, New York.
Civilization was born at happy hour.
That's what wins. That's what stands out. That's what people are interested in. That's what I want to know. The Hospopreneurs Podcast with James Henderson. Hello and welcome to episode 129 of the Hospopreneurs Podcast. Co-founded by high school and uni mates Rich Coombes and Mike Abbott, who have each had previous entrepreneurial successes. Rich with Batlow Cider, Capital Brewing and Will & Co Coffee, and Mike who co-founded Uber in Australia. Kaddy was designed to evolve the antiquated methods of ordering and payment in the beverage industry and operate as a centralised platform to connect venues and retailers to discover, order, invoice and pay. Following an $800,000 angel investor raise in June 2019 and launch in September, June 2020 saw the business raise another $3.5 million in an oversubscribed round to ultimately list names like KTM Ventures, Bring Capital, and a previous guest and friend of the show, Stephen Promutico, the founder of Dimmy and Me and You, all on their cap table. Now having grown to over 10 times the size it was pre-COVID, Kaddy is rolling out across the east coast of Australia with significant plans for the future. Today's episode is sponsored by Access Collins, your one-stop shop for inquiries, reservations, and events. For full visibility and control over your bookings and inquiries in one central system, check them out at theaccessgroup.com.au. Now, let's get into the show today. Hello and welcome to the show, Mike and Rich.
G'day, James.
G'day, James.
Thank you for joining me. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. I'm excited to open up some conversation about not just your backgrounds. Each of you have very interesting backgrounds, and you've come together to create Kaddy, and you've been doing that for 18 months now. The first question that I like to ask is a crazy hospitality story or exceptional hospitality experience. I'd love to know from each of you separately the answer to this question. And I might just start with Mike.
Yeah, sure thing, James. And look, this is maybe not exceptional, but it's a moment in time that I often think about. I was fortunate enough to be one of the founding employees of Uber in Australia. I started at Uber back in October 2012. And as listeners may know, originally it was a black car product, so just limousines that you could order via an app. And then a couple of years later, we launched UberX, which was peer-to-peer. But I still remember vividly being up in Brisbane one evening and walking out of a restaurant. And we just launched UberX into Brisbane a couple of months previously. And as I walked out of this restaurant, there was one older couple very proudly explaining to another elderly couple how to use the Uber app. And I remember at that moment in time just going, yeah, we've got this thing that's going to fly. And the reason was the experience was this, so much above and way better any sort of experience that was available at the time.
Love that. Thanks for sharing that, Mike. And Rich, have you got an exceptional experience or crazy hospitality story?
Yeah, I think my most memorable hospitality experience was back in 2012. I was in Rome and we're walking the streets and we'd had a beautiful dinner. And then in the corner of my eye, I saw a little brew pub. And I wasn't really that familiar that there was any kind of craft brewing scene in Italy at the time. And there was a guy that the windows and the doors were shut. The guy poked his head out and he came out and he said, "Oh, are you interested in beer?" And I said, "Oh, absolutely love craft beer." Anyway, he took me in and he gave me this royal little tour of the brewery. It was a tiny little setup. It wasn't a production brewery. It was just a little brew pub and had a couple of beers straight off the tap. And we sat there for a couple of hours and it was just an incredible experience and typical sort of Italian warm hospitality and some great local beer. Couldn't have been better.
And so where did that come into your journey with your other businesses as well? Because you've been in cider, beer, you've been coffee. Was that prior to, during, post, between these different businesses? Or where was that in your story there?
It was early on. So it was 2012. At that point in time, I launched Batlow Cider back in 2011. In 2012, I was working on Will & Co, which launched shortly after. So it was before the time that I did get involved in the brewing space. Always had a passion for craft beer. And it was moments like those that I think that really drove me to want to open a brewery at some point. So yeah, definitely early on in the piece, but certainly part of that, I guess my motivation for wanting to get into beverages was from those sorts of experiences.
Fantastic. Thank you, each of you, for sharing those stories there. I'd like to move on from here into a really macro scale around why it is that you ultimately do what you do. I'd love to know if you have different sorts of whys and how they've come together to ultimately execute the business that you are running together now. So why do you do what you do? I might stick with Rich for this one. So Rich, have you thought about why it is that you ultimately do what it is that you do?
From an early age, I've been fascinated with hospitality, with good food, good drinks, and that's been a really core part of what I've loved, enjoyed most out of life, going to a good restaurant or a good bar or an interesting cafe and experiencing different hospitality venues and cuisines and drinks as well. So for me, it's been in my blood since an early age. I think at the age of 5, I was, we were at a restaurant in Brisbane and I was ordering crocodile off the menu and the rest of the family was ordering chicken schnitties and steak, and everyone looked at me with some raised eyebrows. But I've always had an interest in just different food and drinks. And I think my why is doing something that I'm passionate about, essentially. I kicked off in corporate, did that for a good stint, sort of 5 years in investment banking before I jumped across the other side and started working on my own projects. So really it was a passion project that had been formed from a whole bunch of experiences. And why do I do it? I just love working with good brands, with quality producers, bringing those brands to life, either creating them or working alongside them in various capacities.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Rich. And Mike, what is it that ultimately inspires you to get up every day and execute?
Yeah, I've always been really fascinated by businesses and what makes them tick. I was an active trader, stock market trader back at school, studied commerce, and similarly to Rich, actually started my career proper in corporate finance. There I got to work with a bunch of different companies across all different industries, which was a whole lot of fun. I got to meet some really interesting people. During that experience, I started becoming more and more, I guess, jealous of the person on the other side of the table that was taking the money and they were going off to build something. And I wanted to be involved in build something great myself. A bit of serendipity. After a career break, I was fortunate enough, as I mentioned, to join Uber at a time when Uber was moving into the Australian market. That was my first real experience of tech. And I almost instantly just fell in love with this idea of tech combining with real world operations and the impact it can have on our lives. And so if you ask me now where my passions lie, they lie in building businesses. I'm passionate about tech. I'm passionate about products and experiences that make people's lives better.
Excellent. And both of you in your answers there, Mike, you mentioned corporate finance. Rich, you said you're in investment banking. Did you meet each other at work? Or how did you actually come to meet each other?
That's a funny one because we actually used to sit across the table from each other occasionally when deals were happening between our businesses. But we actually go further back. We met at school. We went to school together and grew up about 300 or 400 metres apart from each other in Turramurra in Sydney, across a little oval, Kent Oval.
Oh, fantastic. You switched from looking at each other across the oval to looking at each other across the desk. Tell us more about Kaddy and what you guys actually do.
Yeah, so Kaddy is a marketplace that connects trade suppliers with wholesale customers. So we're working with about 300 suppliers across beer, wine, spirits, and seltzer, cider, pretty much all beverage. And what we're doing is we're helping them connect and trade with venues, bottle shops, pubs and bars. So essentially we provide a one-stop shop. So if you're a venue, you can sign up to Kaddy and access this network and community of suppliers and instantly connect and trade. So we're really simplifying the whole wholesale experience. For a supplier, obviously these days, we've just seen huge amounts of growth in the number of suppliers that have hit the market, huge proliferation in craft breweries. Now there's over 650 craft brewers. There's hundreds of distillers. There's thousands of wineries. With that amount of suppliers, obviously that presents a number of challenges in terms of getting access to these suppliers and being able to connect and order. So we're providing those suppliers with a really central route to market and a really easy way to be discovered by venues, as well as taking out a lot of the headaches around invoicing and payment. Kaddy being essentially a B2B marketplace, we look after invoicing and payments. So every supplier that's on Kaddy gets paid within 3 days guaranteed. So they never have to send an invoice, never have to chase a dollar. So what that means is that suppliers can really focus on doing what they love, creating beautiful brands, producing beautiful products, and a lot of the back end and the nitty-gritty admin of running a business, we can take care of through our tech-driven solution.
That's exciting because I know what that's like from a venue perspective. And let me tell you, this is your business, but for anyone out there who hasn't dealt with this, doing invoices is a huge portion. Like you dedicate a day sometimes in some venues to your invoicing. I can absolutely understand what that alleviates for a lot of venues. How did you actually develop the idea together? Did you just one of you approach the other one? How did that kick off?
We came about it from different angles. At Uber, I worked closely with the Uber Eats team and got a real sense of the difficulties that many venues faced on the back end. As you mentioned, James, often venues may be dealing with tens, if not hundreds of accounts. Every account has different payment terms, different payment processes, different ways of ordering. So Rich and I got together early 2019, and Rich had faced these issues as a supplier across the 3 beverage companies he founded over the previous 6 or 7 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess from my supplier experience with my supplier hat on, there's a number of challenges in starting a wholesale business, but also building that and growing it successfully. And I think anyone that starts a business is faced with these challenges. So from a supplier's perspective, there's a bunch of things you need to get right. First is a route to market. Second is finding customers. Thirdly, cash flow and getting paid and making sure that what you're selling comes through the door, but also being able to efficiently communicate and essentially do business with customers. So that's where I guess Kaddy stepped in from a supply perspective. Mindful though that it is a two-sided marketplace, we've focused a lot of our energy on making sure that all the customer tools and the customer requirements are indeed satisfied through the platform. So things like flexible payment options for customers, saying goodbye to credit apps. If you're starting a venue, potentially you can spend 2 weeks just setting up credit apps with all your different suppliers. So with Kaddy, one credit app, and instantly you can trade with 300 suppliers. So really trying to take away a lot of the barriers to trade that currently can exist in B2B relationships, particularly in hospitality.
How are you finding some of the changes that have been happening in fintech and hospo tech in recent years? There's been massive changes with fintech in particular, but then the changes with these hospitality tech companies that have come through, and particularly throughout 2020. I'm interested in how you've adapted there with some of the integrations that you've had. What sort of changes have you seen with that rapid change that's been occurring in the industry?
Yeah, James, we see venues more and more adapting a whole raft of technologies. I think that trend only accelerated last year with COVID. Contactless ordering is being one example. And what we're seeing is venues that are looking for smarter ways to save themselves time, to save themselves cost, to streamline their business, but also to make sure that they're ranging the right products. They're margin conscious, they're looking for ways to improve their margin. So they're looking at tech to improve their business right across the board now more than ever.
What about internally, though, with the sort of changes that have been occurring in, say, fintech and the integrations that you mentioned there around credit? What sort of changes there have impacted your business over the last 18 months?
I don't think there's been any tech changes per se in the last 18 months that has impacted our product. We really feel that we're building in a bold and new direction. Processing payments is core to what we do. And so we leverage other platforms such as Stripe for credit card processing and split payments for direct debit. But we see the platform we're building as being very unique, particularly given that we're combining marketplace features with features that allow customers and suppliers to better engage with each other, to understand who does what role within each organisation and to chat amongst organisations. We feel that we're very much building a new technology.
Do you have something to add on that one there, Rich?
Yeah, I'd say just the last, and Mike touched on it, just the last 5 years, we've seen both on the customer side and the supply side, the adoption of more tech solutions to essentially help either drive revenue or bring costs down. So on the supply side, you've seen a lot of cloud-based either inventory management systems, CRM systems. Obviously, Xero the last 10 years has been a game changer when it comes to small business and managing things like accounting. On the customer side, we've seen new tech solutions such as Me and You that have been adopted pretty broadly across the market, and for a lot of venues has helped them be COVID safe in these uncertain times. So I think there's definitely been a whole bunch of other solutions that fit into the broader B2B ecosystem of tech, which Kaddy fits into.
If we take this more generally, this doesn't have to be specific to the business. I'd like to know what you're learning about or exploring at the moment. So where are you pushing things forward or innovating? It can be professionally or personally. What are you learning about?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think what we're learning about at the moment is what both customers and suppliers are trying to understand their biggest challenges and their biggest pain points. And it's a pretty dynamic world we're living in at the moment. 12 months ago, the conversations we're having with suppliers were were probably slightly different to the conversations we're having now. And same probably holds true with customers as well. So from our point of view, making sure that we're continuing to listen to both customers and suppliers and build the right things and learning from what they're seeing in the market and making sure that all the features and functionalities that we're building in Kaddy platform are really helping them solve their business challenges and helping them grow and essentially do wholesale better.
And for you, Mike, is there something that you're learning about or exploring or doing to adapt yourself?
I really just echo Rich's thoughts. We're a team of 16 full-time and a couple part-time, and all of us try to spend as much time in front of our users as possible. We've got a team of 17 engineers that sit in the Sydney office. They're big into their craft beer and wine and spirits. We take them along to a whole bunch of user meetings. The rest of the team, or most of the rest of the team, come from hospitality backgrounds. We really do everything we can to encourage as much user feedback to really sort of flow through the organisation as efficiently as possible, because we absolutely want to build a product for the industry, a product that the hospitality, that the food and beverage industry really values. And so spending time with our users, getting that feedback and making it flow through to the product that we build is of paramount importance to us.
How do you pull out what's important feedback and what isn't from your users?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because if you built everything that your users told you to build, you'd probably build the wrong thing. So what we try to do is listen to our users very carefully, but really what we're trying to do is understand their pain points, like what are their problems. And so they may have a solution in mind, but there may be a whole better solution that our very talented product and tech team can build. So we try to go into those conversations with a very open mind and really understand the problem, the pain, and try to dig deeper and more intimately understand the problem. And then if we really understand the problem, then we're best placed to be able to take that problem and throw our smart minds at it and try to come up with nifty solutions.
Do you have any tools that you use to facilitate that sort of way of thinking within the team?
There's a whole raft of things that we do, and some of them are actually very simple. So whenever anybody has an interesting conversation with a customer or a venue or an interesting meeting, we get them to write up their feedback or notes for that meeting and share it via a Slack channel that we have available to everybody in the organisation. And we really encourage everybody to read all the feedback. So that's one easy way of making sure that feedback flows through the organisation. We also, from time to time, as we approach our product roadmap, conduct user interviews. That's when we really try to keep an open mind and ask questions that help us pull apart the problem that a venue or supplier may be facing. And then when we understand the problem again, then we can go away and build a solution. So it's something that we're mindful of, making sure that we get lots of feedback flow through our organisation, and something that we spend time thinking about how do we best approach these conversations. So we're not just reinforcing our preconceived ideas, that we are actually approaching these conversations with open minds.
Thanks for that, Mike. Rich, do you have anything to elaborate on that one, coming from a different background there from the supply side?
Probably two things. The first is that you really need to approach these conversations with a beginner's mind, to not have any preconceived ideas, even though there may be a way of doing something or a way of solving something may be apparent. Just listening to what both suppliers and customers actually want and being completely open to those feedback discussions is really important. And then I think the other thing as well is just the prioritization of what we build and how that feedback actually translates into product build. To build certain features, there's certain building blocks that you need to set the foundation for in order to build future features. So I think we spend a lot of time actually not only bringing that feedback and sharing that feedback within the team, but then prioritizing what needs to be built and what makes sense to be built for future features that we think, based on the feedback that we've got, would make sense to build.
And then being able to avoid function creep. And then you mentioned your product roadmap, and then think about how you can step through the development there. If we broaden from the tech space that you're in, from the perspective of maybe brewing or a totally different background somewhere else in the hospitality industry, how could you apply some of these concepts to develop new products within your business?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I think if you were to make the world's best Caesar salad, you wouldn't just go and make the world's best Caesar salad. You might look at how to produce the best crude croutons. So then you might look at how to produce the best bread that produce the best croutons to make the best Caesar salad. So it's working backwards and making sure that all the building blocks are approached in the right way and that you are building the right things in the right sequential order. It's probably a quick and dirty hospitality reference, but I think with anything, you need to start small. You need to get the alignment right of certain ingredients and to create something bigger.
The only thing that I'd add is that no matter how much thinking or how many conversations you may have, you still can never be 100% certain that a feature will be useful or it'll work the way that you intend it. So we're also mindful of taking a fairly MVP approach to new features, whereby we build what we feel is like the cheapest, most useful version and then get it in front of our power users and see how they use it, but also get a whole raft of feedback before we invest a whole lot more resources into developing it into a more fully fleshed product. So I think that step has really saved us a whole lot of time and pain and has ensured that we've only ever really committed large resources to features that we know the industry finds really valuable.
You just said in your answer there, Mike, the term power users, are they your key customers or clients? What is that?
Either the venues on one side of our marketplace or the suppliers on the other side of our marketplace who are our most engaged users, who are using Kaddy multiple times each day, who love the product and love sharing their feedback with us. So they're incredibly valuable, and it's great to be able to share our plans and share early features with them and get feedback from them.
Excellent. What innovations or innovative techniques have you seen in the industry in your time in it in the last 18 months? What have you seen other players doing in hospitality tech?
Yeah, we have seen probably on the restaurant side and on the customer side, there's been quite a lot of innovation, both in Australia and overseas, whether it's looking at how to maximize or optimize restaurant bookings. Obviously, we touched on Me and You, which is a contactless ordering system for venues.
Stephen's been on the program a couple of times.
I think the adoption of platforms and tech in hospitality across the board, not just in Australia, but globally, is increasing. Even since we kicked off 18 months ago, there's, particularly in Europe, there's some similar platforms, probably more focused on food. I saw there was one that just launched in Italy last year, and they've had really good uptake, basically connecting restaurants with sort of providors and beverage wholesalers as well. So yeah, it's definitely a global trend. So it's great to be part of a global trend. But obviously, Kaddy is its own unique offering, and the way we're approaching both those customer and supplier interactions and just trying to make wholesale easier and simpler is our core to what we do.
What changes do you want to see take place in the industry? And I know it's hard to see through the world that we're dealing with at the moment, but more broadly and outside of the COVID impact, what sort of changes do you want to see take place in hospitality?
Yeah, I might jump in on this one. What we'd love to see is a level playing field for all suppliers. So no matter where you are in Australia, 47,000 licensed venues in the country, no matter where you are, it would be great if you could get access to the best and freshest either produce or beverages. So in order to do that, obviously there's a whole bunch of complexities in route to market and actually accessing those suppliers, but being able to have that choice in a really simple way. So at the moment, obviously smaller suppliers are generally, they don't have the resources, they don't have the routes to market that a lot of the bigger suppliers have. We don't feel that Kaddy is a platform just for small suppliers, but what we're trying to do is create a level playing field. So if you're a venue across the country, we try and make it really easy for you to discover any supplier that you're looking for, big, small, but be able to provide those suppliers on a platform or in a forum that's equally accessible by the customer.
Excellent. In growing and developing your business, who have you guys looked to for advice and support on the direction that you're moving?
Yeah, I think between Mike and myself, we do have a lot of friends and network, both in hospitality and business owners outside of hospitality and beverages as well. So whilst it's great to get industry feedback, and we really do feel that what we're building is a product of the industry, everything we build is based on feedback. It's also great to get insights from people that are completely different industries that have some really fresh insights too. So probably from my perspective, I do inclinate towards people within the industry because that's where a lot of my friendships and relationships have been forged over the last decade or so. Mike probably draws a bit more influence from outside, particularly hospitality and beverages, which is great because obviously it means that we're getting some complementary experience and sounding boards that we can bounce ideas and concepts past.
What businesses are you looking to as models for your own growth and development? Are there some businesses that are doing things well that you're taking some ideas from as you grow? Or are you just trial and error, staying agile, nimble, and just seeing what sticks?
It's an interesting one because I think you want to look at businesses that you admire for particular reasons and maybe emulate what they do well. For instance, Amazon is obviously an amazing success story for an online marketplace, and there's been huge amounts of lessons we can draw from their history. But at the same time, if you spend too much time staying in one company and you end up just trying to copy them, you're going to build something which isn't original, and that is very unlikely to be particularly useful. So I think we tried to draw inspiration from a whole bunch of diverse companies and look at companies at what they do well and emulate that.
Do you have some examples there as well as some other companies? You mentioned Amazon as one example that you might look to for some things. In what ways do you look to Amazon, for example, and maybe some other examples of other businesses?
Yeah, sure. I think, like Mike said, we draw inspiration from lots of different businesses. And between your podcast and others, we're always listening to podcasts and trying to be better ourselves and bring some of that inspiration into Kaddy. Obviously, we want to have our own unique stamp on the way we do things and build things. But I think if you look like juggernauts like Apple, like just the simplicity and the beautiful design of the platform, of the various products, we definitely, with everything we do in Kaddy, the user interface and the user experience, it needs to be clean and simple and just really user-friendly. The way that we set Kaddy up initially was to be lazy eyes and fat finger proof. We had the mindset of a venue manager at 2 a.m. on a Sunday morning, basically want to be placing the orders after a busy weekend. Obviously at that time and with that persona, the interface needs to be super, super simple and super clear. So I guess companies like Apple, in terms of ethos and doing things with purpose, there's great companies out there from Patagonia to Thank You Water. And I think building communities around your brand and your product is really important. There's some great examples in Australia as well. A lot of the craft breweries that have been successful in Australia have built amazing communities of people. And we're in an industry of people at the end of the day. Whilst we're building a platform, it is very much, we are immersed in this sort of B2B ecosystem of people. So we draw a lot of inspiration and influence from other companies.
Excellent. Thank you very much for those answers as well, gents. I'd like to know, Mike and Rich, collectively, what's your biggest challenge right now?
I can jump in. So Kaddy is a new offering. It's a new solution for an industry that I guess has been pretty much, I wouldn't say stagnant, but there's certain ways of doing things that have been done that way for a long time. With any platform, particularly in B2B, there's that initial education process around how can we actually make your life better using Kaddy. B2B overarching is probably 5 to 10 years behind B2C. So we are, with our platform, there is a certain level of education. It's a new way of doing things. It's a new way of accessing supplies and trading with supplies. So for us, it's just that constant education process, particularly early on if it's a more traditional venue operator. But the beautiful thing is once we actually show how simple it is to use our platform and I guess all the benefits and the operational efficiencies that come from using Kaddy and being able to showcase all the supplies and how easy it is to access and connect and trade and develop relationships through the platform. That's where it really crystallizes and becomes a pretty easy conversation. But yeah, I think holistically, B2B, particularly in hospitality, hasn't seen a huge amount of innovation over the last 10 years. There's a lot of traditional ways. The proliferation of supplies has probably only happened over the last 10 years as well. So before that, you probably only had a handful of supplies. So a platform like Kaddy was probably less relevant. But now every year there's 100 or so craft brewers forming. I think last year there was a brewer launching every 4 days. That's going to continue. Consumers want the choice. They want the diversity. But from a venue operator standpoint, that obviously brings complexities as well. So yeah, for us, just continual education and building things that will make the lives of venue operators and purchasing managers simpler. At the end of the day, that's our mission, is just to make things easier and help them do wholesale better.
Rich, you mentioned that B2B is behind B2C, 5 to 10 years behind, you said. In what way do you mean there, or ways do you mean?
Yeah, so I think the adoption of technology and the amount of technological advancement in B2B generally is behind B2C. And we've seen this in things like Afterpay, which has obviously been a B2C initiative and success. And now we're seeing a couple of years down the track, we're seeing B2B solutions that are kind of similar. But I think if you look at e-commerce as a general category, There's been obviously consumer is where most of the attention is, and businesses typically haven't embraced e-com in a B2B sense as much as consumers have embraced purchasing online for their own needs. But we're seeing that change and shift, and we're seeing the benefits that can have to businesses as well.
What do you think is really causing that? Because ultimately we are in the people business. Every business is run by people ultimately. What's really causing that change? Is it that because businesses are larger and there's obviously more finances to those decisions, then is that what's causing it to be slower moving? And has that always been the case? Or is B2B ever ahead of B2C? I'm just interested in the comment that you made about B2B being behind B2C at the moment.
Yeah, sure. I think generally B2B is behind. In the hospitality and beverage industry, you still got billions of dollars of business being conducted off platform, being conducted over email and over text message. And this business just has to move to platform, has to be done more efficiently over time. I think, as we discussed previously, we're seeing an acceleration of adoption of technology, and COVID has definitely helped that. As to why B2B lags, it's hard to say. Like a common reason given is that it's generally easier for people, for developers, for product managers to build technology that they use as a consumer day to day. And so maybe that's the reason why tech resources are generally find themselves working on consumer problems. But at the same time, these B2B problems, they're huge pain points. And this is very big business. B2B is bigger than B2C. And so we see huge opportunity there. When we look at other platforms, probably a common mistake we feel is that these platforms are assuming that people do B2B business in the same way as B2C. So assume we're buying a pair of jeans from a website. Generally, you log on, you see what you want to purchase, you click and you buy it. It's very transactional. Whereas what Rich is very well aware of with his experience and what is reinforced to us every day here at Kaddy is that B2B is much more relationship-based. Businesses don't purchase of each other as people within businesses.
This program is hosted by James Henderson with technical production by Jake Olver. Voiceovers were by Angus Brennan and Shim Phelan. Thanks to our distribution team, and a special thanks to you for tuning in every week. This program was produced by H Media. We'll see you soon.